The important part is just to do it, just to get started. And getting started and then asking the next question, well, what has to happen next? What has to happen next? And you start moving, and then it's the momentum, it's the fact of doing it gives you the confidence to keep going.
Unlost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. Welcome to Unlost Cause, where we celebrate stories of individuals who have turned their lost causes into unlost causes, reclaiming their dreams and living with purpose. Today, I'm thrilled to host Seth, Kessler, and Lee Sosin, co-founders of Gapwell, who are helping young adults thrive on their journey from high school to career. But I'm going to start by verifying that you two actually met at the first day of college at Brandeis. Is that correct?
Using first floor, very first day in August of 1990.
1990.
That's my next door neighbor.
Wow. And what was the first impressions that you've had of each other?
You know what? I will say that I vividly remember meeting Seth. It was the very first day, the chaos of moving into a dorm room, and he literally was in the room next to us. And I just remember from minute one, we were laughing about stuff. And I still remember, I won't get into lengthy stories, but I still remember funny moments from that very first day. And it's, we're talking about more than 30 years ago. So it's really been a journey.
Yeah, there were a lot of first impressions. Lee seemed like one of the people in my hallway that I felt like I could get along very nicely with.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't predict that we'd be in business together 30 years later, but first impressions were positive.
Awesome. And was it also true that you married both of your wives you met at Brandeis as well?
That is definitely correct. Seth actually was friendly with my wife before I even met her. So he's known her longer than I have by probably 6 months or a year. And, but all four of us, Seth and his wife, Dara, me, my wife, Michelle, we all went to Brandeis together, and it's been a wild ride.
Awesome. But you didn't both drop out of college or start a company right out of school together. Instead, you waited till you were in your 40s or 50s to do that. So it sounds like you pursued separate careers, but stayed in touch. So I'm curious, what did each of you do after college, and especially leading up to maybe your last few roles before co-founding Gapwell?
Yeah. Go ahead, Seth.
Sure. So I was an economics major, journalism minor. I did a lot of work in business and communications and a lot of startups. So I went from Brandeis to living in the greater Boston area, then off to Wharton for business school. And then I spent the bulk of my career in the global marketing supply chain, some startups, sold some companies, launched them into global businesses. It was a great adventure. I really enjoyed bringing ideas to life, which was really an exciting part of my first 2 decades of business experience. And I think that led right up to the COVID years, where I think a lot of us had those moments of reckoning where it's like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life, assuming we make it through the global pandemic? And that's what led us to our venture together.
Yeah. Great. And right after Brandeis, I moved out to LA to pursue a career in the entertainment industry. I went to grad school at USC for film school, and then spent most of my career in media companies, Yahoo, Time Inc., Hearst, always at the intersection of content and audience, which now has come to bear great fruit with Gapwell. And then most recently, I was the CMO of a wellness company, and helping that brand evolve into being a more service-oriented brand, again, which has really played well for Gapwell.
Got it. And then, starting a company usually just doesn't, pop up overnight. There's like a kernel of an idea or a pilot light that gets lit for what you end up doing, which is, this passionate helping these young adults, pursue their dreams and find their way. Was there an initial point for each of you that had your kind of own pilot lights lit before it came together?
David, I think we first started talking about the idea of starting something together. And we threw some ideas on the table. And when this particular idea came up, it was sort of an obvious opportunity. It was my wife's suggestion to start to dig into this a little bit. And once we started, we really couldn't stop. And I don't think either one of us could have ever predicted that this is what we would have started together. But what ended up happening was the more we talked about it, we went from, I wonder if there's a business idea here, to, wow, there's so many problems to solve in this area. And it went from, again, being tentative about trying to decide whether we should do it to, wow, there's so much opportunity here to really have an impact. And that was really motivating.
And Lee, what about yourself? Was it, did you also have any maybe impact in the past where you had a mentor or someone guide you? So you're looking at all these ideas that you and Seth were throwing on the table, right? Was there one where you're like, oh, someone really helped me, or I see this problem a lot from my friends or family, and I really want to lean into it? So I'm just curious, is there any backstory for you around the significance of Gapwell?
Well, Seth and I both have children that are in the college and, post-college age. And so witnessing their struggles of transitioning from high school to college, and then now with my oldest from college to career, and seeing not just them, but their friends, their roommates, their, other people from our town, and the struggles and the gaps that exist in that journey. Once we started pulling on this thread, it became not only, well aligned with things that we were experiencing, both of us, every single day, but also you started to really understand the need, and because we were experiencing it firsthand. So I would say that what really has been a great motivator is not something that happened in the past, but something that's happening right now in the present.
Got it. And I'm curious, when you were at your last role, and Seth, you pointed out COVID, which I think did cause a lot of people to take a step back and reevaluate. And, then afterwards, jumping and starting a company together as a team. What was that? Tell me a little bit about that last role. Were you losing steam, or is it still exciting, but you had to scratch this itch? Or were you just, feeling like, oh man, this isn't bringing me as much joy as it used to? So I'm curious for both of you, what it was like in the last role prior to making that leap.
Sure. So, I talk to a lot of people that are about our same age about this very topic. And, for me, I am very much of the don't look backwards, always look forward, always find exciting things to get out of bed at 4 a.m. And when COVID hit, I think like a lot of people, I started to think to myself, okay, once we get to the other side of this, what's my plan?
Yeah.
And what's my purpose? And so my company had gotten bought out, and I started to take on some roles that I did well professionally, but I didn't find it as motivating. Partially because it was a different point in my life, and partially because, like Lee said, there were things going on in the world around me with my family and friends. And I felt like, how can I have an impact that will be meaningful for me and exciting for me? And I think in a lot of ways, I was really looking for something, but I didn't know what I was looking for. And then once we found the idea behind Gapwell, the opportunity, the flame that you mentioned earlier, it was like, wow, this is so obvious. This is obviously the right idea at the right moment in time with the right partner. It was very clear to me, this is what I want to be doing for the next decade or so. I want to make sure that I'm just as excited about the next 10 years of my career as I was on the last 10 years. So for me, it was really crystal clear, and it was exciting because I was jumping out of bed again and excited to go to work, even if, going to work means going to your virtual office. It was, that reignited my spark for the entrepreneurial game that, people get really excited about.
I was commuting from New York to Florida for a job. And so it was brutal. I was going down every week or every other week for 3 nights or more. So when the opportunity came along to not just do something like this that has purpose and meaning and relevance to our lives, but to work with Seth and then to do so without having to get on a plane every week, it was a dream come true.
Yeah. And then, so much of life comes down to timing. And as you think about the time when you did launch Gapwell, do you think that in hindsight, like you had wished you launched it sooner, or was the timing just about right and how you would like the cards to fall together? So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I don't think we could have had this business, 10, 12 years earlier. I think the timing was actually perfect for it. Not just because of our children being of this age and us being able to really understand the demographic. I mean, you can't start a company without really understanding your audience. And so I think that we had the ability to do that. And I also think that there are a lot of reasons that we can talk about then why young adults need this help now more than ever. And I don't think if you go back 10, 12, 20 years, I think that young adults are in a different space right now and they need more help than certainly than we did. And then even 20 years earlier. So it is for us, we're grateful that we stumbled upon this opportunity right at this moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, they say that necessity is the mother of all inventions. And Lee, you just mentioned that you are witnessing some of this within your own kind of network and family dynamics. So tell me more about that. Like, what were you witnessing? And then how did that start, going and becoming a potential business idea?
Sure. So there's a lot of research out there. And actually, we conducted our own research. We did a pretty robust 1,000 participant survey of college. Once we started looking at this space, and this is advice I would give to anybody who's starting a business is do research. Don't just trust your own instincts. Learn things about the customer base that you're trying to serve and what they really care about. And we did, like I said, we had college students from over 100 universities respond to a survey. We had parents of college students respond to a different survey. There's so much research out there. And what all of that research is saying is that young adults need help and they want help transitioning from high school to college. And that first year, especially, they are not showing up prepared. And some people are saying that it's COVID related. And we know that COVID had a huge impact on development of young adults and children of all ages. But if you actually look at stats that came out even before COVID, college students were overwhelmed with anxiety, with stress, depression, loneliness. This trend has been happening for a long time. I can just tell you that from our own research, you talk about what percentage of students, and this is in their own words, what percentage of students show up ready for college on day one. Less than a third felt like they had self-confidence on day one. Less than a third felt like they were ready to handle a college workload. 40% felt like they were able to navigate socially. 82% said that they experienced a lot of stress. A lot of stress was the phrase, their first year.
Wow.
And only less than half felt that they were able to handle adversity. So these kids are showing up and young adults, and they're saying, and that we ask them specifically, do you want help? And on what topics do you want help? And it was a resounding yes. 75% were saying, I wish I had more help with this transition. And we can go into much more detail about it because it all served as the basis for the development of our services and our products and everything else. But learning what they were struggling with was key.
Yeah. And one follow-up question around that. I think your data suggests that about 1/3 of people or these young adults felt like they didn't feel like they were well equipped to handle college. Is that trend getting worse? Is that number, do you expect it to creep up and up and up? Or is that COVID and that bump will start going down? What is your best judgment on that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's only a third felt like they were ready. It's
okay. Third felt, wow.
Ready.
Yeah.
It's 2/3 felt like on day one, they walked in and they were not prepared. And this is now students who were sophomores, juniors, seniors, looking backwards at their experience that first year. I don't know if it's getting better. I do know that when we do the same survey next year and the year after and the year after, we'll be able to find some trends. What I do know is that there are a lot of schools that are very, acutely aware that this problem exists, and they are trying very hard to solve it, right? They're introducing first year seminars. They have mentoring programs. They have all kinds of things. Unfortunately, a lot of them are well-intentioned, poorly executed, and they're not reaching enough students. So, one of the things that when we have conversations with parents, we're talking to them and they say, look, you need to, in addition to buying your kid a laptop and a microwave and all these things, you need to give them the resources they need to succeed.
Got it. Well, before we jump more into the business, I want to talk a little bit about this transitional point. Like, was there a triggering event for you two to say like, hey, let's get together and really get Gapwell going? Or was it more of a gradual evolution?
So I think I could distinctly remember, I can see the spot from my office window here. I was talking to Lee. I think I was probably walking my dog. He was in the car with his wife. I was on speakerphone. And I remember like we started to talk about this and it just became really clear to me, like, number one, I want to work on something I'm genuinely excited about. Number two, I want to work with someone I'm excited to work with. And I was like, I want to solve a big problem. Like I want to solve a problem that matters and not matters in the sense of like, oh, we got to hit our numbers or we have to hit our financial targets. Like to me, I'm on the phone with a dear friend who I've known for decades. His wife is listening in. She's like, yeah, you guys should do something together. Like, it was like one of those moments that seems so ridiculously obvious. And like I said, I can see that spot. Like I vividly remember where we had the conversation. It's sort of like one of those surreal moments. I mean, Lee and I have not only, been with one another on the first day of college, we were standing next to each other on 9/11 in Lower Manhattan. Like we've had moments together in the last few decades where like I remember those moments vividly. This is one of those moments where, it just seems so obvious that we had something that we could bring to the marketplace that is sorely needed. And both when I put like my parent hat on as a parent of high schooler and or college students, and I put my business hat on, like in both cases, it was exciting. And so that's how I think about this is, once I could see it, it was crystal clear. But again, I think Lee was right. We would not have been able to launch this business a decade ago. But I also feel like there's a huge demand for what we're doing, both the products and the services. And I don't think the situation is going to get better in the near future. I think there's a lot of work to be done. And while I think we're having a big impact on that, I mean, if you talk to high school students, college students, you talk to administrators at universities, you talk to parents, like everybody is concerned. And they're concerned for various reasons. And it's, I think Lee and I have some pretty good gut reactions about what we thought going into this. But as Lee said, we did a lot of research. We asked a lot of questions. We didn't assume anything. And I think it's actually been really helpful for us because, we think we know what our kids want. We think we know what other parents are thinking. The reality is we don't. And some cases, Lee and I are spot on. Other cases, we're like, wow, it's worse than we thought.
Oh, wow.
Actually, that brings up a good point, which is, and I'm sure we'll talk about the products specifically, but we also surveyed parents, and the gap between what the students revealed to us that they were experiencing and what the parents thought the students were experiencing was pretty pronounced. So you have parents who think everything's great. It's that sort of not my kid syndrome, right? Oh, my kid's not going to struggle. My kid did great in high school. My kid, and my kid isn't stressed, and my kid isn't thinking about transferring or wondering if this school's right for them. And my kid only needs help, maybe studying or whatever. And meanwhile, you've got the kids saying, I need help. I'm not, I'm stressed. I'm struggling. I think part of it is that they're not, it's hard to be honest when your parents are spending so much money to send you to college. And for a lot of kids like this, they understand the pressure. And also because the parents have been saying to these kids, oh, it's best 4 years of your life, best 4 years of your life, best 4 years of your life. And then the kids get there and they're lonely. They're having a hard time making friends. They're overwhelmed by the academics. When we talk about being successful on campus, it's not just academic success. It is a vastly different environment for these kids socially. It is easier to be lonely on campus than ever before. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So there's a huge disconnect between a parent and what they think their child is experiencing on campus and what the child's actually experiencing on campus.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then when you two were thinking about coming together, how much, it does take a village to start a business. And having co-founders, I've done solo founding and I've done co-founding, and I have my opinions on both. And so I'm just curious, like, how much vetting did you two do on each other, or, speed dating or anything like that? And I do know you have this like 30 plus year background that obviously helps, but I'm just still curious, like, how much vetting you did with about each other.
Look, if you listen to your friends and family, you'll hear the adage of like, oh, you don't want to go into business with your friends, all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I get it. You could have a great experience, you have a terrible experience. I think for me, and I've worked with some awesome people over the years. I've gone to school with some awesome people and grad school with some awesome people. Like, when it came to the idea of Lee and I working together, I mean, we've been friends for a long time. And as a result of that, like, I've known him through various phases in college, married life, with kids. Like, we've been through a lot. And so as a result, like, it was really incredibly refreshing to partner up with someone that you feel like, like, I trust him. I don't need to second guess his decisions. He doesn't need to second guess my own. I mean, that's really, for me, important. And I also realize, for me personally, because I've got my own opinions about, like, when you start businesses, because I've worked for venture-backed businesses and private equity owned and public and family owned. But like, I realize that I really enjoy collaborating with a partner. I don't need someone to tell me what to do. I don't need someone to, give me a performance review, but I do really benefit and enjoy collaboration.
Yeah.
I like to be pushed. I like to be held accountable. I mean, I want somebody who, can help pull the best work out of me. And I think we've done enough things over the years, personally and professionally together, that I felt like, this is not a question of, do we need to put together strict rules of how we're going to operate? Like, you don't stay close personally and professionally after a few decades if you don't have a mutual respect and a good working relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that the other piece of, just to, again, anybody who's in the process of starting a business or growing a business and is, you want to find somebody who has complementary skills. Seth and I are not the same. We're not the same. And that, I think, is what makes the partnership really great, because I know that he's better at certain things than I am. And he's, and one of the things that he is able to bring to the table, that just, he has a let's get it done mentality that is incredibly important. We don't wait on things, we do it, we get it done, we go to the next thing. And so I embrace that, and we assign tasks to each other. But we also know where he's stronger or I'm stronger, and that works really well.
Well, yeah, I think that's super smartly to think about, like, strengths. And I think for the listeners is, there are things that they're super passionate about, but they're going to be really good at that because they're, it's not a job, it's a joy for them. But then it's like the other areas where they have to find complementary skills. So how would you summarize, like, each of your individual strengths and how you complement each other? Because it sounds like it's working extremely well. So I'd love to understand that a bit more.
I like deadlines. I like to create even false deadlines. And I'll tell Lee, we're going to have to launch that product on January 1st. Do we have to launch on January 1st? No. But in my mind, we have to have it launched on January 1st. And so Lee will play along. He's like, okay, what time on the 1st are we going to, are we going live on it? And I think, as Lee said, like, I like to gamify things. I like to win. Don't challenge me to board games, but like, yeah, I like to win.
Pickleball.
Yeah, or pickleball. I like to have fun. I mean, I think when Lee and I talk about this, like, we laugh a lot. Why do we laugh? Like, well, it's more fun to be enjoying yourself, even if you're working super hard, even if you're getting up super early, even if you're working, 10 times harder than you need to. Like, it's fun to watch your ideas come to life, and it's fun to challenge one another. And I as Lee said, we both like to do things, but we're better at certain things. So in some cases, like, I like to do that, or I like to work with that client, but you know what? It's better suited that Lee work with that person, or he do meeting number one on that scope. So I think a lot of what we've been able to do is just, play to each other's strengths. And also, if I know there's certain things I can do that'll help Lee, I'll do it. And if Lee has to pretend like there's a deadline on New Year's Day to launch a product, that's our deadline.
It gets done. So it's been great. It's been really great. And it's also fun to discover things Seth and I, we actually did work together many, many years ago when I first moved to New York. And he was fresh out of Wharton, and we were working at a startup together for just a year or two. So we had that experience, but it's really fun now, so many decades later.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're working one-on-one with one of our coaching clients, for example, or we're putting together a curriculum, or we're working on the content piece for some of the products that we're launching, and Seth says something that's really smart, or he brings an insight to the table, or says something to our client that has them motivated. I really enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching it happen. And I'm sure the same goes, in the other direction. It's great because we're discovering these complementary skill sets along the way, ones that we didn't even know when we got started.
Yeah. And, I know that it's easy to talk about turning a lost cause into an unlost cause and leaning into it. But I also know I don't want to be flippant about it. It takes a lot of planning at times, financially, talking with your family, career-wise, emotionally. So I love to hear you two share, like, how much planning and thought did you put into it?
I feel like to some degree we kind of like jumped into the deep end of the pool. And again, like, in the early first few weeks, we went from let's kick the tires on this idea and see if there's something there. And then suddenly we're on the side of a mountain in Missoula, Montana, talking about Gapwell, which as a business didn't even really exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to realize, okay, we know there's something here. We don't know what it is yet. And we weren't so rigid to say, well, here's our business plan. We have to follow our business plan. We kind of gave ourselves permission to challenge our initial thinking or change our personal opinion about something based on what we were learning or based on what we were uncovering. And what ended up happening was, we got more excited about the idea. And then we started to have the conversations like you're asking about, which is, okay, well, how are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
Are we doing this full-time, part-time? What's our plan? How much are we going to invest in it? We were both at different moments in time with our families and our, other responsibilities. And so I think we're very transparent with each other. Well, here's what I can do now. Here's what you can do. How are we going to get it done? You're trying to share the workload, right? And some things need to be client facing and some things are work behind the scenes. And I think we're pretty good about being transparent with each other about, okay, here's what I can do now. And then also here's what's most important, because there's never a shortage of things to do.
Yeah. And so just to double click on that, just two things from each of you all is one, your family situation. Do you still have kids at home, or are they both out of home, or you don't have kids at all, but it sounds like you do? And then second, how important was it for you to both do full-time, or did you do part-time and then full-time? So family and then kind of financial and kind of part-time versus full-time.
So Lee's got 3 kids. I've got 2 kids. I've got one who's in NYU in New York City, and I've got one who's currently a senior in high school going through the whole what's next process. So I was seeing it from, hey, I've got one in college and one who is going to be leaving the nest soon. And Lee was a few steps ahead of me with one about to graduate, another one in college, and one applying. So we're, like Lee said, we're right in the thick of it. And so I think, again, we had a lot of personal perspective to bring to the conversation from our respective families. Some similarities, some differences. And, when we first started, we were both doing this as a side hustle. And then for me at least, about a year ago, I started doing this full time. And I think we both had that kind of aha moment of like, this thing is going to grow really big. So we have to get a little ahead of it and make sure that we're putting the foundational work in, both with the services side of our business, which Lee referenced earlier, the coaching and some of the work that we do there, and then some of the products, the first of which we launched in August, the next one we launched a couple days ago. But we knew we had to put the work in now, because you can't just go live and then hope that everything goes well, right? We had to put in the level of responsible discipline around what we're bringing to the market, because I think a lot of our success has come through word of mouth. And you have one bad experience that is not in your best interest. So I think we've really worked hard to make sure that every customer is as happy or happier than the last one.
Yeah. So just to recap for the listeners is that you both have a blend of either one child applying or one out of the nest. And then you started out more part-time as a side hustle before graduating full-time. And on that latter one, do you think that's a pro or a con? I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, it's a pro because you can kind of, see how things are going before you jump. On the other hand, there's that thought you have to burn the boats to take the island, right? So I'm just curious, you have the benefit of hindsight. What do you think?
Well, look, I'm sure if my wife were answering that question, she would say I was so much happier working on Gapwell. Like, I was a pleasure to be around. I was excited. I was jumping out of bed. My energy level was high. My kids were, excited for me. Like, everyone around me, friends, family, saw the difference between doing something that I didn't want to be doing versus doing something that I was passionate about and felt really good about on a holistic level. I mean, that's how I thought about the situation. And from a timing standpoint, it just worked out well for me in terms of like when I was ready. I was like, now's the time to do it. And nobody around me was worried. They were all like, this is exciting. So excited you're doing this now. So I think, I'm not saying that everyone who's listening to this should jump right into whatever their next big idea is, but I think at some point you got to trust in yourself, and hopefully you're surrounded by people that Lee and I both have in our respective lives that are encouraging.
Yes.
And excited, not trying to like bring us down with what if. Like, no question in my mind that we're going to be very successful. It's about doing it the right way and for the right reasons from my point of view.
And the other thing is that our kids are old enough that not only are they sort of aware and understanding, but they're participating. They are a big part of our offering is about older students giving advice to younger students. And so now that Seth and I both have those older students in the family, they're participating. This is not something that they are just sort of observing from the sidelines. This is a real family business.
Yeah. And Seth, you talked about it's good to have people really supportive and not these what if Eeyores of the world. But, thinking about rewinding the clock a little bit, what would you say for each of you was the biggest kind of barrier, either mentally, financially, emotionally, that you had to overcome before starting the business? And then I want to get into the business side of the house. But just this last part of like, what was the biggest one? Because I know it takes a lot of authenticity and vulnerability to actually make that jump. But then there's also the reality of like, well, I do have to consider all these other factors.
Sure. Look, I mean, that's life, right? You have to factor in decisions, financial, personal. I mean, I think for me, once I knew this is what I wanted to do, everything was crystal clear. And fortunately, I've got, a wife who was very supportive of that. Like Lee said, I've got kids who are old enough to understand like why we're doing this and why this is so important. I mean, my biggest challenge these days is my family, my friends, everyone's got ideas.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, hey, did you think about doing this? Or what if you position that? I mean, which is exciting, right? Like I used to go to a dinner party, they'd ask me what I do, and I would come up with some answer depending on how much I wanted to talk about whatever I was doing at the time. And now it's like when I mention this period of time, the journey from high school to career, everybody has a point of view on that. They have a kid, they have a cousin, they have a friend, they know someone. It's one of those topics that it's hard. I don't care where you are in your life to not know someone who is navigating that and know someone who might be struggling with it, either as a parent or as a teen. I mean, it's really quite exciting to be working on something where it's not about people saying, I wonder if this is going to be successful, but more about like, hey, how are you going to handle all the different things that you should be doing? Like, that's the challenge that Lee and I have for each other, which is, we have lots of great ideas, but we remind each other like, hey, we can't do everything. Yeah. So you know what? We're going to focus on this idea and then this next one, and we're going to reprioritize our list, and we're not going to take it personally if my favorite idea is not Lee's favorite idea. So a lot of it is really trying to be smart about how we use our time, and our time is valuable. So when we have a favorite client and we both want to be on the call with that client, you know what? We can't afford to have us both on that call. We have a lot of work to do. So you draw proverbial straws, and Lee gets it this week and I'll take it next week. And, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. And so again, these are good problems to have.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Lee?
And I think that Seth mentioned this earlier, but we gave ourselves permission to not know exactly what the business was when we first got started. Mm-hmm. I always like to say, we're pulling on the thread and we're seeing what happens. And okay, well, wait a second. We started off, as I said, we started off focusing on, well, what about this gap between high school and and college, and what's that? And a lot of students, this is taking off, but students need help. And then we like, well, wait a second. I have a daughter who's about to enter the workforce, and she is graduating without really understanding how to build a resume, how to do LinkedIn, how to do networking properly, how to interview prep, there's that whole area. And then, what about in between? And then how do we create products at scale? I mean, we gave ourselves permission so that it didn't feel overwhelming at first. At first, it was just conversations. And then luckily, we got our first coaching client. I mean, we hadn't even formed the business. And someone was like, hey, can you help my kid? So we were able to give ourselves the time and the permission to not have everything figured out minute one. And I think what that has allowed us to do, it has allowed us to really think expansively about what we can get accomplished, this year, next year, and then what is this grand, future vision that we'd love to get to at some point. And because we weren't so prescriptive about this is what the business is, now let's turn the, open for business sign and wait for a customer to walk in. It allowed us to really, I think, have a healthier relationship with the risk that we were taking or the time that we were about to invest in it.
Yeah. No, I love to come back to that, Lee, especially I love how you two gave yourself permission to see how it unfurls and any type of learnings or pivots that you have done since you started the business. But for the audience out there, can you describe what Gapwell's offering is? Is it a product, a service, both? Can you please share what for the listeners?
Sure. So Gapwell, which we started about 2 years ago, we have services and we have products.
Okay.
The services is where we started. That could be anything from planning a gap year after high school. It could be summer internship, first job out of college, or what we call success coaching, which is one-on-one coaching with, again, young adults, whether they're in college or elsewhere. Because as Lee said, it's not like the high schools or the universities have set these kids up for success. And us as parents, we throw them over the fence and we say, well, they're in college now. They're adults. Our work here is done. Wish it were that simple.
Yeah. Sign me up.
So from our point of view, the services, like Lee said, people started asking us for help even before the business was off the ground.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. We also have a number of products. And as I think we referenced earlier, we launched our first one this past August, which is, so Gapwell is the company. The Gapwell Guide is a direct result of the survey that we referenced earlier in the conversation, which is, first year students desperately want and need help on virtually everything except for how to take a test. And they don't want it from any of us. So we have to check our egos and say, we're all three of us are smart people and we've got a lot of life experiences, but they want to hear from wiser, older students who've been there and done that very recently. And we made a conscious decision that we wanted to make this authentic. We wanted to be vulnerable. This is not social media. This is like, we want to help these first year students. We want them to listen to the advice from these older students who've been in their shoes, who've made the same mistakes, who understand exactly what they're going through, and not only be authentic about their experiences, but also have a little bit of, words of encouragement at the end of every piece of content. So every week they're getting, the issue, or let's call it the episode, shows up in their phones. It's short form video content because this generation prefers video to reading. Surprise. And again, it's one-to-one conversations, and they listen to Max from Miami or Ruthie from Michigan or Ilana from Northwestern, and they tell it like it is. And this is not social media where I'm at the greatest school with the greatest football team, the greatest party. This is, hey, these are the mistakes that I made when I was a first year. And here's what felt like the end of the world, but it actually was a blessing in disguise. And so we launched that in August. We have a team of wise older students from big and small universities around the country. The content is fantastic. I can say that from a parent point of view. I can say that from a business point of view. And we really had a great first semester. It was really about supporting first year students as they navigate that first semester. And now we're entering the second semester. We launched our second product 3 days ago.
Congratulations.
Which is thank you. That's our college crash course. So it's a bundle. It's basically a course for all rising, or let's say high school seniors that are about to graduate before they get to college. So that helps them before they walk in the doors, before they land on the campus. And then the Gapwell guide supports them every week while they're navigating their first year experience. The whole idea of all of this is what can we do to normalize their experiences, to give them the advice that they want and need in an authentic way, and help pick them up. And I think that's really very consistent with our mission, which is we want these young adults to thrive, whether they go to college, whether they go to trade school, military, we don't care what they do. And there's not a single path that they should be following. So we are looking at distinct points in time and how we can help people. So if you are in college, which is supposed to be this magical experience, like what can we do to make sure they have a positive first year experience? Because, it's not that easy, and it's definitely not the best 4 years of your life on day one.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So if I recap it, it sounds like first you had people asking for coaching, yep. And then afterwards you launched in August the guide when you're in college, curated from people who are in school, not from adults like us. And then recently this year, you just launched for rising high school seniors who are about to go into college, like this preparatory crash course for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think that's fascinating. And I'm curious, was that always in the game plan? Like, you think about Elon Musk, he was going to do like the Roadster, and then he was going to do the every person car and XYZ. Who knows if that's true or not? But I'm just curious, was that the game plan? Or were you thinking about, I'm going to just do consulting and see how these pivots, Lee, come by? And then that was the demand. And then you moved in that direction. So share with me how like this roadmap unfurled for you.
So Lee and I very early on thought there was an opportunity to focus on the first year college experience. And like we said, anecdotally, we thought we knew it all. And we did this big survey, and the results were surprising. They validated certain things that we assumed going into it. And then some of the data came back even more compelling than we were anticipating. And so literally you can take the results of the survey and say, this is your prescription for the Gapwell guide. And again, the fact that 93% of the people surveyed said where they want to get their advice, wiser older students, basically everybody said that. It didn't matter what size of the school, didn't matter whether we're surveying someone in their first year, someone reflecting on their first year. And the more that we looked at it, we're like, wow, this is incredibly compelling. And we started to interview I'm sure Lee remembers this. We were interviewing older students to be the contributors. And literally the first one says to me, oh man, I wish they had this when I was a first year. And I wrote it down like, wow, that's a great quote. And then the second person said it. And by like the fifth person, I thought, wow, everybody is saying the same thing, which is, why didn't this exist when I was a first year? And, as Lee knows, his daughter started college in COVID, right? Like that was, I interviewed someone today and she said the same thing. She said, when I started college in the Midwest, she said it was not easy. She's like, I tried to transfer twice. I was like, how do you even do that? But I was like, okay, so she wanted to transfer twice. And so again, like the more we dug into this, we realized the first product that we were meant to bring to market was the Gapwell guide. And then as we were launching that, we actually taught a mandatory first year course at a prominent university in the Northeast. And we taught 41 first year students deer in headlights when they're looking at you because they're a couple weeks into their first year college experience. And what we learned from that was not only profound, but we started to realize, because we're using this as like a real-time focus group, let's get feedback on the videos. We got fantastic feedback on not only the content in the courses that we were facilitating, but also on the feedback on the guide content as we were just launching it. But we realized before any of them arrive on any campus, there's a need. And you can't just assume because you're paying a lot of money to a particular university that they're going to set your kid up for success. Like they're doing their best, a lot of well-intentioned programs at universities around the country, but these kids are showing up from these great schools, attending these great schools, and they're just not prepared. And it's a big risk. It's not just the financial risk, it's also the emotional and psychological risk. You don't want someone showing up at college and then saying, you know what, this is not for me, or I can't do it, or I don't know why everyone else has got it all figured out, but I don't. Like we really realized that we had this opportunity to create this bundle so that even before you get to college, you come in with some certain basic knowledge that you need to be successful, not just in college, but in life.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lee.
I was just going to say that we did not architect all of this out in advance. And I think what Seth said, I just want to underscore, is that we learned from the research, but the research didn't just validate that the need existed, right? But buried in there was the solution, right? This idea that, well, who do you want to get advice? Because our original idea was, oh, we're going to get experts. We're going to have, we'll get famous people. We'll get all these people to give advice. And we allowed ourselves, again, to really look at the results and say, oh, they're telling us what they want. They're telling us that they don't want that. They don't want the university giving them advice. They don't want parents giving them it. They want older students. And that changed the way we thought about everything. And then as Seth said, as we went along, we said, okay, wow, the Gapwell guide is solving a certain problem, but we probably need to go a little bit further upstream and now help them before they even take that first step on campus to make sure that they're well prepared. And I'll just, quick anecdote, Seth mentioned that we taught this class. One of the sessions was on managing your time and like how to be organized and manage your time. We asked the students, how many of you use a calendar? And only half the hands went up. So how do you have half of your class in college not use a calendar? And it's like, you would think that's the most basic thing, but that's how these kids are showing up to college. So when we say it's a crash course, it's about organizing your time, organizing your money, how to make friends, how to join clubs, it is what they need to be able to walk on, so that hopefully the students that go through this are not, the results that we got the first time, which is only a third felt confident. We want people now to change that number so that everybody feels confident when they walk on campus that first time.
Yeah, no, kudos to you two for, doing the research and then being open-minded to see the gold in there and then pivoting and leaning more into it as the students are telling you their feedback, because I think that's brilliant and will definitely go a long way. So 2 questions is, one, you mentioned this Gapwell research. Is that available for the general public? And because I can put in the link in the show notes, I don't know if that's available.
Absolutely. It's we have a summary of it on our website.
Yeah.
On the blog. We released those results over the summer. And again, it's shocking.
Okay.
Like we thought it was going to be compelling. Some of the results came in well beyond what we thought. And I think that's a theme, really, Lee, in our business. Like, we thought certain things like, oh, someone's a junior at Wash U, great school, Washington University in St. Louis. I'm sure they've got an awesome resume and they've got great interviewing skills and their LinkedIn profiles. Like, we started to realize all these assumptions that we were making as adults were not holding up.
Yeah.
And I think it's whether you're talking about their first year, you're talking about their third year, like young adults, they need a lot of help. And I think there's a lot of ways that high schools and universities can improve their game to better serve the needs of these young adults going forward. But in the interim, we're doing everything we can to help make sure that if a student thrives, the student wins, the family wins, the school wins. Nobody benefits if they have a bad experience or they're not their best version of themselves. So we're really trying to make sure that, we're aligning everyone's interests on this, because it's not like, oh, your kid dropped out after a few weeks. Great. The university gets to keep the money. They see that as an empty seat.
Yeah.
So it's really about like, how do you align everyone's interests? And I think when you have candid discussions with people, university administrators and so forth, they'll tell you, like, if you can do anything that can positively impact retention, they're all ears.
Yeah. So just last question on the survey, just from an intellectual curiosity standpoint. Is there any gender differences? Like, do men or do women struggle more or less? And then is there any difference between if a parent says, oh, well, my child's going to a smaller private college, so there's more attention from the university or administration given to them versus like, a big public university? So those would be my 2 questions about the research about, is there any gender difference? And what about small kind of private liberal arts college or versus like a big state university?
There was not a pronounced gender difference. I mean, when you have 82% of students saying that they experienced a lot of stress, it's everybody. And what's interesting is that stress is different for different students. So you can have students that don't experience any academic stress, but they experience a lot of social stress, or vice versa. We did find differences between small schools and large schools. That was something that we had a data scientist look and help us derive insights from the data. And it was very interesting because students at larger schools had struggled more socially, right? It took them longer. So one of the questions was about how long did it take you before you felt, before you felt comfortable socially, whatever. And there was a greater propensity if you're at a large school. Imagine if you're going to a school with 25, 35, 45, 50,000 students, that can be overwhelming. So the students that were going to smaller private schools were able to navigate socially, I think, faster. However, we also asked, was there a moment during your first year in college? Now, remember, these are sophomores, juniors, seniors answering that are looking backwards. So was there a moment when you felt like you were at the wrong school? And that's where the small schools really fell short. So the smaller schools some of them have numbers well above 70%, where the students were saying, yeah, I thought that maybe this isn't the place for me. The larger schools which often have more school spirit or more activities or whatever, they didn't have that kind of issue. It was also interesting that if you're at a larger school, you have more resources available, but you take advantage of them less. So one of the questions that we asked was, because we didn't know at the time, it wasn't one of these surveys where you sort of know what results you want to get, so you focus we asked very genuine. We wanted to learn, and we said, hey, your university probably offers support in managing your time and managing your money and studying and more efficient, like how to do this. And do you ever take advantage of it? The number one answer was never. And it was
that's our tuition dollars.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So parents are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to send their kids off to school. And the kids are saying, the more the resources that are available to me, the less likely I am to take advantage of them. So it was, again, very shocking, this small school versus large school dynamic.
Yeah, that's astounding. And then thus far in your Gapwell journey, for each of you, what has been the biggest challenge and the biggest reward that you've gotten on this journey?
I think the reward is easy, which is when you see one of our clients excel, or you see where they were versus where they are now. I mean, that's on a personal level really fulfilling. So I feel like, I love the coaching work that we do. These young adults, they listen to us. We're not their parents. They know that their parents or themselves are investing in this. So they take it really seriously. And that, I think, is probably the number one motivator for me. It's when our clients win, we win. Like, we get excited about that.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge is, at least for me, is there's so many things I want to get done. And I can't get up early enough. I can't work long enough. Like, I'm watching a happiness podcast right now, and it talked about how profound the impact of sleep is.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I cut into my sleep, then I'm not going to be happy, which means I'm not going to be as effective. So it's, to me, it's how can I be really smart about where I spend my time and know what Lee and I need to do ourselves versus what we can outsource. And, I think, as any entrepreneur will tell you, right, it's hard, right? You got to figure out where your time is well spent. I think we not only have to make that decision individually, we have to make it collectively.
Yeah.
And so it's like, Lee, if you focus on that, you can do it better and quicker. If I can focus on this, that's a lot of the challenge, I think, right now. I mean, there's nothing else. Like, all the unknowns of starting a business to me are manageable. And maybe it's because of, where I am in my life right now. Like, that stuff I can handle probably differently than I could 20, 30 years ago. But the biggest challenge is just like, I want to see our efforts pay off. I want to see our coaching clients, our product clients benefit. And it's, there's only so much you can get done responsibly. And so it's like that constant need to want to do just a little bit more, but also want to keep balance.
Yeah.
All right. But I will add nothing to that. That was, I fully support that response.
Got it. And then I want to talk about, support and resources when you're launching and you're trying to turn a lost cause into an unlost cause. So, we talked about it takes a village, but did you folks have specific mentors or role models that you really leaned on to help guide or shape, especially the early days of Gapwell?
I think it was sort of, I feel like we did two things. We went out and talked to people who were supposed to be experts in fields that were relevant to us. right? College admissions counselors. We talked to parents. We talked to university administrators. We talked to young adults, and we just listened, right? And that's how we end up with a lot of clients. But, number one was like, let's make sure that we got diverse perspectives and not just the two of us. But Lee and I intentionally went and met with people that we know from our respective careers who've been incredibly wise and helpful in many ways. And I generally wanted to get their advice, even if they felt like, hey, you know more about this than I do, or, it was just, these are people that I respect. And I think they've done a lot for me personally. Mm-hmm. And so I care about what they think. I care about whether they think, is there another way to think about this? Is there another approach that we could bring to it? So I feel like we went to both, wise and successful mentors. And I say successful, I mean, it can be successful any number of ways, life balance, financial success. But I think that really, to me, was important because, I always tell people, like, if I ask David, if I say I want some feedback on our new product or the website, like, I really mean it. I don't want you to tell me what I want to hear. Like, I want you to give me some candid feedback. And you know what? If something I thought was great or Lee thinks is incredible, and you tell us, you know what, you totally missed the mark on this one, like, I'd rather hear that. Like, I'm not at a point, I don't think either of us are at a point in our lives where you're not going to offend us. Like, if it makes us better, then everybody wins.
Yeah. There's really no ego. We're here. And I think it's interesting because, we talked about this, Seth and I did earlier this week, just this idea that usually what happens is that people launch a business that's very closely aligned to the thing that they've been doing their whole life, right? I worked for this type of company my whole life. Now I'm going to do it on my own. And we didn't do that. We actually, have entered a space where we feel very comfortable, and we're drawing on skills that we've developed over decades of working in, various roles, but we're entering it with an open mind, which allows us, I think, to see things that maybe other people who've been in the educational space or the personal coaching space, that to see things in a different way, or to be open to learning things from research, or to be open to ideas and contrarian ways of thinking, that, it's just been a benefit. So I think that's been a really important part of the journey as well, is that we are not entering it with ego and we're just allowing ourselves to take our skill set and apply it to something we really care about.
Yeah. And then along the way, were there any specific books or podcasts or YouTube series or anything like that you two really liked and learned from and shared with each other, and you're both diving in and really enjoying it?
Well, you speak about podcasts, if Seth's wife, Dara, hadn't listened to that original podcast, which mentioned gap years, we probably wouldn't even be sitting here today. So right. There is a podcast at the heart of our story, even though we've, since evolved our thinking and our business and our offerings and everything. Like, it really did start with, we're just huge fans of the podcasting world. We send stuff to each other all the time. Seth mentioned a happiness podcast. We listen to things because not only are we developing products, but we're coaching young adults, and those young adults need encouragement. So if we can hear someone talk about something in a certain way, about overcoming adversity or self-doubt, or how to stay on target, or how to stay committed to a goal, or what do you do when you slip? Like, we're learning all the time, so we can bring those lessons back to our coaching clients.
Mm-hmm. Any resources that you would like to add, Seth?
No, I mean, I think Lee and I were constantly sharing articles with each other, podcasts with each other. He mentioned the happiness podcast that I referenced earlier, like three different people mentioned that to me in a matter of 1 week. I thought, all right, once interesting, twice coincidence, third time I'm like, a psychiatrist recommended it to us, a business school classmate recommended it, someone else. Like, it was just one of those things where I think we take a lot of nuggets of information and we think about, well, what does this mean for me personally? What does this mean for my family? What does it mean for our clients? Right. And there's usually lots of opportunity to apply. But again, like Lee said, like, we have to remember, it's not about Lee and I standing up on a soapbox giving great advice. Like, for our audience, these young adults, that's not who they want to hear it from. Right. Yeah. And so we have to be very deliberate about, if our student contributors are successful as part of Gapwell Guide, that means we're doing something right, because they are the mouthpiece. They are the authentic people telling the story. And as much as parents like us all want to think we can tell our kids what to do and what to think. Like, that's not the reality. But if same advice comes out of a 21-year-old's mouth, they're bound to listen. And so, like, we just got to remind ourselves everything has to be aligned with what we know that our clients want. And I think that's an important theme that we've really kept consistent since we've launched the business.
Yeah. And Lee, you were mentioning the research that there's a lot of these large schools who have a tremendous amount of resources, but the kids don't avail themselves of these resources. So in that analogy, the government provides, there's the SBA, Small Business Administration. They have these small business development centers, SBDC. They have SCORE mentors. Did you avail yourself of any of those resources either?
We haven't yet, although Seth actually worked at a small business advisory when he was in business school. So I have unlimited access to someone who has all of that knowledge. We haven't done that yet. I mean, we've been able to, I think, accomplish a lot between the two of us. And talking to one of our mentors, he's like, I cannot believe what you guys are able to get done.
Yeah.
So we haven't, but we are, by no means closed off to those resources.
Yeah. I mean, it's ironic, when I worked at the Wharton Small Business Development Center, when I was still in business school, I managed a portfolio of 20 clients, and the advice was always the same. Create a business plan and execute, like all the stuff that I would tell my clients, I think about in what we're doing, and I'm following some of the rules.
Yeah.
We're totally ignoring some of the other rules. But you know what? Like, we could spend our hours developing business plans, but I think instead, because we're in partnership with each other, we're holding ourselves accountable it's not about a great marketing plan with no financial targets. It's more about, let's keep scheduling strategic offsites, either at Lee's house or at my house. Let's make sure that we are putting this in front of, executives that we respect, and ask them, what do we got right? What do we have wrong? I mean, that comment that Lee made about, a professor from Wharton asking us all these questions over lunch. And at the end, he said, so who's doing all this?
Yeah.
And we were like, you're looking at it. So I think, we're rolling up our sleeves intentionally, because I don't feel like Lee or I would be in the best position to make these decisions if we couldn't say from firsthand experience, this is what we see in our coaching business. This is the feedback we're getting from our Gapwell Guide clients. This is what we saw in the classroom. When you ask them who's using a calendar and half the hands go up and that's it, that kind of leaves a mark. Like, wow, that's a basic thing that I just assumed kids show up in college. We were wrong. Like, a lot of things, we assume how certain young adults consume content. We were wrong.
Yeah.
We heard it loud and clear. And I think that's really important, is we think we know because we read it in the news, we hear from others, but we make it a point to ask our contributors, ask our subscribers very specific questions to make sure that what we think we know is actually aligned with the reality.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why so many well-intentioned university programs miss the mark, right? Who would think that you need to teach young adults how to use a calendar? And not just how to use it, but how to use it the right way to actually maximize their time. Like, they don't think that that's the issue. But if you're a first year in college and you can't keep track of what's due, when it's due, how to manage your time, what can I actually go to this party? I didn't get my assignments done. How do I look ahead? How do I manage? Like, if you can't do that, there's no way for you to be successful. So we're learning every day from the people that we're interacting with. And when we see, we don't assign, occasionally we assign and we say, hey, it'd be great if someone could, do a piece on this. We know that this is a topic that's aligned with what's going on in the calendar of the year, of the first year. But most of the contributions from our contributors are their own ideas. Hey, this is something I struggled with. And they come with topics that we would never have thought. But if you're, for example, if you're a woman in a major that is dominated by men, and you have to learn how to raise your voice to be heard in a study group or a project group, and because you're the only girl on that team, like, that's a relevant piece of advice that lots of first years should be hearing, whether you're the a young woman who's in those shoes, or you're a young man who should probably not do the things that this person experienced. So we would never have thought to assign that. So it's coming from them. It's coming from them based on their own experiences. And we get surprised every day.
Yeah. So as you know, you're into this Gapwell journey, and I'm curious of like, how has that changed your perception of yourself from kind of thinking from the inside out, but then also has the perception of like your friends and family changed about you?
That's a great question. I was just thinking when you were asking some of these questions about how I'm finding myself surprisingly more flexible than I would have thought I would be at this point in my life and career. But I think when Lee mentioned earlier how we didn't continue down the path of what we've always been doing, and now we know it all and we can do it in our sleep, like I think that's a blessing and a curse. And I think because this is a new frontier in many ways, it's been really interesting to bring that sort of mindfulness and open-minded thinking to everything that we come across.
You know, you get this feeling, it's like anything else, you know, whether you decide to run a marathon or whatever. And at first running 5 miles seems so overwhelming.
Yeah.
When you run 5 miles, you're like, oh, okay, I did that. Now I can do that. That's something I have done in the past. So I think that and then you move on to the next goal and the next goal. And so I think that one of the things that this has thankfully given both of us is this feeling of being capable. Right? Because you're just doing it. You're just doing it. And I don't know how we're doing it. We're just doing it. And so you start feeling more and more capable because things don't, and I said it early on, like we have pushed ourselves to just do it. Just get in business, start the product, launch the product. We'll learn along the way. We'll improve it as we go. And that discipline of not being able to allow fear to get in the way of taking that next step has been really helpful. And that's where I think the partnership really helps a lot because, you know, I'm not going to back down in front of Seth and he's not going to back down. Like, if we're going to do that, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, it's like, you're going to go jump in the ice water. Let's jump in together.
The bravado helps us and the playfulness helps us. But I think, David, when you asked about like, what do people around us think? Like, I get told all the time, I think even you and I, when we talked the first time, like, I'm clearly excited about what I'm doing. I'm excited about what I'm doing. I'm excited about who I'm doing it with. And it shows. And so I get that comment from a lot of people, even people I don't know. And I jokingly said this, but it's true. Like, there's a dog park directly across the street from my house right here. And we have a ton of clients from that. And these are just random dog owners who like, I'm out there with my cute little dog and we end up chatting. They ask me what I'm doing. I tell them about Gapwell. And before you know it, they're referring me to someone or their cousin or their kid or like, you know, when you're excited about something, it's an energy that I know I like to be around. And I think it's great because if I was just doing this for the money or the, you know, some professional thing I want to be able to say, like, it's not that. It's like, I actually care about young adults, my own and others thriving. Yeah. Like, that's really important. And I think, you know, my family definitely recognizes that. I mean, 110%. And I would say that even people I don't really know pick up on the fact that I'm excited about this. And, you know, I try not to dominate conversations when I'm out with people, but like, if you work for the State Department or you work for the IRS and I'm helping, you know, young adults succeed in life, are we going to talk about the new tax strategies that are coming into the new administration? Or are we going to talk about your son who's struggling in college, right? Like, it ends up being one of those things where it's hard to not have a personal perspective or experience that relates to what we're doing. So it's, you know, I think that comes out a lot. And for me, it's refreshing because I'm a social person, but I like talking about things I care about. And it's nice when your work and your personal values overlap.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love that adjective, refreshing, how you talk about how this has impacted you. So switching gears, like, you know, how do you think you would feel is, you know, if you were kind of on your last legs or deathbed and you hadn't pursued Gapwell?
Look,
I
I think that there's no way to, not making a choice is, there's no way to know where your life goes. I'm just glad that we did make this choice. Like, I think it's really hard to say, you know, some people from the time they're really young, they're like, I want to start my own business. I want to build my own business. I want to, so I don't think I would end up on, my deathbed with regrets. But I can say the opposite is by far more true, which is that I know that I will feel a sense of accomplishment, regardless of how, you know, big we turn Gapwell into as a business. Like the accomplishment, and to Seth said, like if we have one young adult stand on their own 2 feet in a way that they weren't able to before. As he said, like we do success coaching of students who are struggling in college, and to watch them thrive and spread their wings and soar, it's incredibly fulfilling. And so I think that it's more of I appreciate the blessing more than I worry about what would have been.
Yeah. What about you, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I stuck with it. And when I say that, I mean, like, I knew that the advice I was getting from different people about what I should do next was not resonating with me. And even though I heard it multiple times, and the advice that I was giving, that people were giving me, and these are very successful people, on paper, they look like they should have it all figured out. And you talk to them and they're like, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. I'm not this. Like, I was like, that's not what I want. Like, that's not my next decade. Like, it's just not going to be something where I'm going to jump out of bed in the morning. And so I think to your question, it's not about like, oh, I've always been dreaming about Gapwell for 40 years and I finally did it. It was more like when I saw this opportunity to have an impact and I saw I had an awesome partner to do this with. I was like, to not do this just made no sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I think about it is, if I passed on this for some silly reason that I convinced myself, oh, now's not the right time. It's too risky. It's not big enough. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be very successful. I can't tell you what path we're going to be going down. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of funny stories about how we got to where we got to. But like, I love talking to people who are just as excited about what we're trying to accomplish. And it might be they're just talking from a personal, young adult perspective or a parent perspective, but I mean, they're just as excited as we are. And it's great to have a lot of people rooting you on and opening doors. And I mean, we've got a lot of great opportunities that people out of the goodness of their heart was like, I love what you're doing. I've got an idea for you. I've got an opportunity for you. I want to introduce you to someone. Like, I think that goes a long way. And if I were not doing something like that on my deathbed, I can't imagine I'd be like, wow, those last 10 years of doing whatever I was doing, like, that's just, I don't know. Like, I don't think that people want to think back on like, punching a clock. Like, that's not what we're doing here. We're getting stuff done with real deadlines, with fake deadlines, whatever it takes to get it done.
And then, for someone listening with a simmering dream or something that they're like, hey, I don't know if this is going to be a lost cause or not, what advice would you give them?
Look, I think that if anything has come through, it's just do it. You just have to do it. You have to get started, right? And it's okay to start something. Without. There are a lot of unbelievable stories of accomplishment where someone started, working on a business on their commute, right, to their full-time job. So it doesn't mean you have to put the rest of your life on hold and jump in with both feet day one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the important thing is it's like anything else, right? Whether it's getting in shape, losing weight, writing that novel you always want to write, or starting a business.
Yes.
The important part is just to do it, just to get started, and getting started and then asking the next question. Well, what has to happen next? What has to happen next? And you start moving, and then it's the momentum. It's like we were talking about before. It's the fact of doing it gives you the confidence to keep going.
Beautiful. What about you, Seth? What advice would you provide?
I mean, from my point of view, if you really want to do something, you figure out a way to make it happen. And I agree with Lee. It doesn't have to be full time on day one. But like, I feel like I'm working harder now than I have at least in 5-6 years, right? Like the further you get into your career, lots of stuff becomes second nature. It's why you get paid all this money, because you're so wise and you've got all this experience. But like, I feel like I'm working much harder now, but I also feel like I have much greater balance. Like I've got a better perspective on, I'm going to work hard, but I'm also going to prioritize the right things. And again, knowing that I don't need to go explain why I need to be somewhere on Monday, like we just figure it out. And I think it's good to set yourself up for something where the risk does not, like, you don't want to create an environment where you're so anxious that it's seeping into your personal life. It's causing you extra stress. Like, I think if anything, I need the discipline around when I'm working versus when I'm not working, just to keep the balance in my life. But, I'm listening to happiness podcasts. I'm paying attention to how much sleep I'm getting. I'm, getting a lot of exercise. Like, I'm doing things that I know are good for me holistically, but I know the business benefits as well. I think it's important if you're really passionate about something, you got to figure out a way to make it work. And if that means you make other decisions in your life to allow that to happen, I think that should be a priority.
Yeah, well said. And, since we're in a community together at Unlost Cause, what ask would you like to make to our listeners?
I think that, certainly for listeners who have young adults in their lives, be aware that, it's like that old David Bowie lyric, be aware of what they're going through. It is different. It is different. And as much as we want to belittle it, and it's not, and pretend that, it's the kid's fault. It's not. They are going through something that is different from what we went through, and the experiences they have and the environments that they're in are different. So, whether you turn to Gapwell to help you support these young adults, or you do it on your own or through other ways, but be aware that these young adults are experiencing college, high school, and career search and job search in a way that is different from the way that we all did. And I think that's really important. So just be less judgmental and more supportive of the young adults in your life. And that is what we're trying to do here, is support young adults so that they can, thrive. So that would be my wish of the community.
Yeah. Seth, do you have an ask?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the request is just to be brave, right? As a parent, as a young adult, like, it's okay to do something a little different. It's okay to, step off the proverbial hamster wheel, right? Like, it's okay. And we know this because we're all adults here, right? So, but I think if you can make it safe for those around you to feel like they can express how they're feeling, or, say they need some time off, or they need to, like, I love when I see young adults make a conscious decision about what they're going to do next or why they're doing it. And it's okay if everyone else feels like they're doing something else. I think the more that you can encourage that, and I think a lot of times, the best thing you can do is have your kid talk to some other adult in your life that you trust. So, again, we joke about it. Like, if we could all rotate our kids to a different set of parents, they would actually listen, and there'd be no need for Gapwell. But I mean, it's like, the whole idea is like, we love what we're doing because the young adults that we work with really respond to it.
Yeah.
But, we have to be careful, right? We can't tell our own kids what to do because we're their parents. So they're going to hear it differently. So that's my request, is just, be kind and, be okay with the fact that what you think they should do is different than what they decide to do. It's going to work itself out.
Great. And so if the Unlost Cause audience is inspired by your story, how can they support, contact, or follow your Gapwell journey moving forward?
Well, they can certainly visit gapwell.com or gapwellguide.com, both of which are great places to get started. And then they can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or reach out to Seth or me personally.
Great. Well, thank you both, Seth and Lee, for sharing your incredible story and inspiring mission. You're a true testament to the idea that it's never too late to turn a lost cause into an unlost cause.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, David.
Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets. The Unlost Cause Way, one story and one person at a time.